The Atlanta Hawks have decided to part ways with Trae Young. They just made a breaking trade about an hour or two ago in which they sent Trae Young to the Washington Wizards for CJ McCollum and Corey Kispert. So this was an interesting trade. To me, it's not really a blockbuster trade. I know some people will say it's a big trade because of Trae Young's, I would say, star power when it comes to name recognition. But to me, I feel this is not a trade that really moves the needle or changes the landscape of the current NBA, if we're being honest about it. But to me, it was like an interesting trade in a way that the way the Hawks parted ways with Trae Young, I felt his value was probably at an all-time low right now. This year, he's only averaging 19.3 points per game on 41% from the field and 30% from three. So he's been terrible this year when you look at the numbers. And those are really, really putrid numbers when you look at them. So he's been subpar. And the biggest issue really with the Hawks was Trae Young was going to make a combined estimated $95 million over the next 2 years. So you had a lot of cap space taken up by Trae Young, and you were just not getting anything of value back for what you're giving to him, in the sense that his production did not equal that contract. That contract was like an albatross around their necks. So I'm sure the Hawks are just happy to get rid of him. I do think they probably could have gotten more value for Trae Young a few years ago when he was putting up even better numbers than what he's putting up now. Some team would have probably been willing to give up draft picks. In this trade, it was just a straight up swap to get rid of him. I think I always felt Trae Young was overrated, and he benefited from the Stephen Curry wave, I would say, in the sense that because of Steph Curry's great run he had during the mid to late 2010s and early 20s, that there was a lot of copycat players, a lot of league executives looking to replicate what Steph did. And they were trying to find guys who played like Stephen Curry. Trae Young was that guy. They were hyping up to be the next Steph, but I felt he was never going to be able to do it because he looks like he's only 5'11 at best. I know they list him at 6'1, but he looks shorter than that. Stephen Curry's a legit 6'3", and height matters in basketball, and it definitely does, especially for Curry. I feel if Curry was even a little bit shorter, he would not be the player he is. So they really fell for the hype of him being the next Stephen Curry. That to me was like the biggest thing with the Hawks. Like, they actually passed up on Luka Doncic to get him. Like, I remember they drafted Doncic and then they flipped Doncic for Trae Young simply because they thought Trae Young was going to be the next Stephen Curry, which I thought even back then was stupid. I just didn't see it happening. I did see him being a guy who can get you 20 or more, but not like a really dynamic player or being a superstar, just in the sense of being like a candidate for MVP. But I think when it came to the Hawks, they fell for the hype, and also just because of the success they had during that one playoff run a few years ago with Trae Young when he led them to the conference finals back in 2021. I thought that was very fluky, and they just really got lucky during that run. Certain things went their way, like they pulled off some upsets. For example, beating the Knicks in the first round when they were the underdog and they didn't have home court advantage, and then upsetting the Sixers due to Ben Simmons being a mental midget and choking and just throwing away that series. They really shouldn't have won that series. And then they get to the conference finals and they almost pull off the upset against the Bucks, but the Bucks end it and their run is over. But I think because of that run, there was some delusion within the Atlanta Hawks organization that they could replicate that type of run again, and that one run, it was going to be the first of many great runs that the Hawks have in the East, and that eventually they'll get out of the East and possibly win a championship with Trae Young, that it was going to be the start of a prosperous journey with him. But I never believed it. I just thought it was very fluky, and the next few years afterwards, it was proven to be a fluke because in those next two seasons, Trae Young was able to lead them to the playoffs. but he couldn't get them out of the first round. And so it was all for naught. And then the last 2 seasons, the Hawks have not even made it to the playoffs with Trae Young. So it hasn't really been worth it, this experiment with him. Now they have a young star in Jalen Johnson who's emerging, and he seems like the guy now that the Hawks want to build their team around, and they feel he can be a legit superstar. So that's really the big thing for the Hawks. And from what I've heard, that they just want to clear up Trae Young's albatross contract so they could free up some space to get a free agent or be able to use that cap space to make another big trade to bring someone to Atlanta with the team that they have. So that was really, really the big thing about this trade. Now, CJ McCollum is still a pretty good player. He's actually having a better year than Trae Young statistically when you compare their stats. They score about the same amount of points, but he's shooting the basketball much better than Trae Young. 45 from overall from the field and 39 from three. So he's a solid plug-in player for them right now for this season, especially with them probably trying to get into the playoffs, that he actually helps them in that regard. So this could end up being a good move for them in the short term. And then in the offseason, we'll have to see what they decide to do with that cap space. Now, I don't know much about this Corey Kispert guy since I don't follow the Wizards. He seems like a solid role player from what I've seen in stat line, like a guy who can hit threes at a high rate, and nothing else really sticks out, but a guy will get you 9 to 12 points a game. So they acquired a solid role player in this guy. But yeah, that's really it. I don't think this trade really moves the needle for either of these organizations. Wizards, I think, are delusional now from what I've heard. They think Trae can be the next Stephen Curry for them. And Trae is still very young. He's only 27, so maybe they're hoping he has a resurgence and they can ride that out. But I don't have anything else to say about this trade.